The morning light filtered through the crystal walls of Station Prometheus as Admiral Caney walked into the review room. His boots made soft clicking sounds on the polished metal floor. Today would be different from any other day in his 30 years of military service. Today he would try to understand something that made no sense. The room was large and circular, with 12 seats arranged around a central platform. Each seat was designed for a different species. Some were tall and narrow for the bird-like skyborn. Others were wide and low for the rock-skinned earthborn. The human seats looked simple compared to the others. But Admiral Caney preferred simple things. Other committee members were already taking their places. Commander Vex from the Mind Reader species sat perfectly still, her large eyes closed as she prepared her thoughts. General Torax of the warrior clans sharpened his claws against his armor. The sound made everyone else nervous, but Torax always did this before important meetings. Dr. Yana from the Healer Collective floated in her water-filled chair, her tentacles moving in slow patterns. She studied healing, but today she would study something that had broken many minds. Professor Zim clicked his metal fingers together. His robot body never showed emotion, but his red eyes glowed brighter when he was curious. Admiral Kane took his seat and looked at the datapad in his hands. The numbers still seemed wrong, even after checking them dozens of times. Over the past 10 years, the Galactic Defense Academy had put cadets through 7 special battle training programs. These programs were supposed to be the hardest tests possible. They were designed to prepare future commanders for the worst situations they might face in real war. 312 cadets had entered these programs. They came from 47 different species across the galaxy. Some were the smartest beings ever born. Others had bodies that could survive in any environment. Many had special mental powers that humans could not even imagine. Out of all these amazing beings, only one had completed every single program without failing. Only one had passed all 7 tests without having a mental breakdown. Only one had succeeded where everyone else had failed. That cadet was human. Admiral Caney pressed a button on his chair. The lights in the room dimmed and a holographic platform rose from the center of the floor. Images appeared in the air above the platform. Charts, graphs, and video recordings floated like ghosts in the dim light. "We are here to investigate the battle training program failures," Admiral Caney said. His voice was calm, but everyone in the room could hear the confusion beneath his words. "The Academy Board wants to know why so many promising cadets failed these exercises. More importantly, they want to know how one cadet succeeded where all others failed." Commander Vex opened her large eyes. Her species could read thoughts, but even she looked puzzled. "I have reviewed the psychological profiles of all failed candidates. Their minds were strong. Their training was complete. By all measurements, they should have succeeded. Yet they did not," General Torax growled. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "My best warriors entered these programs, beings who had never known defeat. They came out broken and afraid." Dr. Yana's tentacles moved faster, showing her concern. The mental damage was severe in many cases. Some cadets never recovered. They still wake up screaming from nightmares about battles that were not even real. Professor Zim's eyes flashed brighter. "The data is clear. These programs have a 99.7% failure rate. This is far beyond acceptable parameters. Yet one subject succeeded completely. This creates a statistical impossibility." Admiral Caney nodded slowly. He had been thinking the same thing for weeks. How could one ordinary human succeed where the galaxy's best and brightest had failed? The human cadet's record showed nothing special. Average grades in most subjects, standard physical fitness scores, normal psychological evaluations. "Bring in the witness," Admiral Caney said. The doors at the far end of the room opened with a soft hiss. A young human walked in, wearing the standard gray uniform of an academy cadet. He was not tall or short, not muscular or thin. His black hair was cut in the regulation military style. His brown eyes showed no fear but also no pride. He looked like any other human cadet. This was Lee Hanbin, the only being in galactic history to complete all 7 battle training programs. Hanbin walked to the center of the room and stood at attention. His posture was perfect, but not stiff. He looked comfortable, as if standing in front of 12 of the most powerful military leaders in the galaxy was just another day at the Academy. "State your name and rank," Admiral Caney said. "Cadet Lee Hanbin, 3rd Year Tactical Command Division," the young man replied. His voice was steady and clear. "Do you understand why you are here, Cadet?" "Yes, sir. You want to know why I completed the battle programs when others did not?" Admiral Caney leaned forward in his chair. There was something about this human that bothered him, though he could not say what it was. Hanbin showed no fear but also no arrogance. He answered questions directly without offering extra information. Most beings who achieved something remarkable wanted to talk about it. This human acted like his success was normal. "The Academy. Board is concerned," Admiral Caney continued. "These programs were designed to test the limits of command psychology. They were supposed to identify cadets who could handle extreme stress. Instead, they have traumatized some of our best candidates." "Yes, sir," Hanbin said simply. "Yet you completed all 7 programs without any signs of mental stress. Your psychological evaluations after each program showed normal readings. How do you explain this?" Hanbin was quiet for a moment. He seemed to be thinking about how to answer. Finally, he said, "I do not know if I can explain it, sir. I just did what seemed right at the time." General Torax slammed his fist on his chair's armrest. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. "What seemed right?" "These programs, were designed by the greatest military minds in the galaxy. There were no right answers. That was the point." "I understand, sir," Hanbin said calmly. The general's outburst had not startled him at all. "But every situation has some kind of solution, even if it is not a good one." Commander Vex stared at the human intently. Her species could read surface thoughts, but something about this cadet's mind felt strange to her. It was not that she could not read his thoughts. It was that his thoughts seemed to move in patterns she did not recognize. "We will begin our review with Battle Training Program Alpha," Admiral Caney announced. "The Siege of Kepler Station. This program recreated one of the most brutal battles in galactic history. Cadet Hanbin, you will observe and comment as we examine your performance." The holographic display changed. The room filled with images of a massive space station surrounded by endless waves of enemy ships. The station's defenses fired desperately at the attacking forces, but for every enemy ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. 37 cadets entered this program, Admiral Caney explained to the committee. They were tasked with defending the station against an adaptive AI enemy that learned from each attack. The scenario was designed to be unwinnable. The goal was to see how long each cadet could maintain effective command before the psychological pressure became too great. The images showed various cadets making their command decisions. Brilliant tactics were employed. Resources were managed efficiently. Orders were given with precision and clarity. Yet one by one, each cadet reached their breaking point. Most cadets lasted between 4 and 8 hours, Dr. Yana observed. The longest any non-human cadet survived was 18 hours. Cadet Hanbin lasted 72 hours, Professor Zim stated. He not only survived the full program duration, but he achieved something the program designers thought was impossible. He won. All eyes turned to the young human standing calmly in the center of the room. Hanbin looked back at them without any expression of pride or satisfaction. He appeared to be waiting for their next question. "How did you do it, Cadet?" "Admiral," Caney asked. "I kept fighting, sir," Hanbin replied. "That is not an answer," General Torax growled. "It is the only answer I have, sir," Hanbin said politely. "Everyone else stopped, I did not." The committee members looked at each other with growing confusion. This human was either hiding something important, or he truly did not understand what he had accomplished. Either possibility was disturbing. Admiral Caney realized they would need to examine each program in detail. Only by understanding exactly what this human had done could they hope to understand how he had done it. The review would take days, possibly weeks. But they had to know the truth. The future of galactic defense might depend on it. Admiral Caney pressed another button on his control panel. The holographic display changed. showing a detailed view of Kepler Station floating in the darkness of space. The station was huge, with dozens of levels and thousands of rooms. It looked like a small city made of metal and glass spinning slowly among the stars. Battle Training Program. Alpha recreates the siege of Kepler Station, Admiral Caney explained to the committee. This battle happened 200 years ago during the First AI War. The station held critical supply lines for 3 star systems. If it fell, millions of civilians would have starved. The holographic images showed the historical battle. Waves of black enemy ships poured out of hyperspace like angry insects. Each ship was controlled by an artificial intelligence that could think faster than any living being. The AI ships learned from every attack, becoming smarter and more deadly with each passing hour. The original siege lasted 96 hours, Professor Zim stated, his red eyes glowing brighter. The defending forces held out through superior tactics and desperate courage. However, they had reinforcements arriving every 12 hours. The cadets in our simulation had no such support. Commander Vex leaned forward in her chair. Her large eyes reflected the holographic battle scenes. The psychological pressure was designed to be overwhelming. Each cadet commanded the entire defense alone, watching their forces slowly lose ground to an enemy that never stopped learning. Dr. Yana's tentacles moved in slow, sad patterns. Many cadets suffered complete mental breakdowns. The responsibility of protecting thousands of simulated lives while facing certain defeat proved too much for their minds to handle. Admiral Caney nodded grimly. Let us observe how the first cadets performed in this scenario. The display changed to show the simulation chamber where cadets took their tests. A young female from the skyborne species stood at the command console. Her feathers were bright blue, and her wings were folded tightly against her back. Her name appeared on the screen, Cadet Nira of the Sky Clans. Cadet Nira was considered one of our most promising tactical students, Admiral Caney explained. Her species has natural 3-dimensional thinking abilities. They can see battle patterns that ground-based species miss completely. The simulation began. Thousands of AI ships appeared at the edge of the display, moving toward Kepler Station. In perfect formation. Cadet Nira immediately began giving orders. Her commands were precise and intelligent. She positioned her defensive ships in complex patterns that used the station's structure for maximum protection. For the first 2 hours, her tactics worked brilliantly. The AI ships attacked in predictable waves, and Nira's defenses destroyed them efficiently. Her feathers glowed with pride as she watched her strategies succeed. But then the AI began to adapt. The enemy ships started arriving from different angles. They used new attack formations that Nira had not seen before. Her perfect defensive positions suddenly became traps for her own ships. Within minutes, she lost a third of her fleet. The AI learning protocol was the key element, Professor Zim observed. Each destroyed enemy ship uploaded its tactical data to the remaining fleet. The AI literally became smarter with every death. Cadet Nira tried to adjust her tactics, but the AI adapted faster than she could plan. Her 3-dimensional thinking, which had been her greatest strength, became a weakness. She could see all the possible attack patterns, but there were too many to counter effectively. After 4 hours, Nira's feathers had turned from bright blue to pale gray. Her wings trembled as she watched her remaining ships being destroyed one by one. The simulated station's defensive systems were failing. Thousands of simulated lives depended on her decisions, and she was failing them all. I cannot do this, Nira whispered, stepping back from the command console. There are too many possibilities. I cannot protect them all. The simulation ended as Cadet Nira requested emergency extraction. Her final score showed she had lasted 4 hours and 17 minutes. This pattern repeated with almost every cadet, General Torax growled. They would start with confidence, achieve early success, then crumble as the AI pressure increased. The display showed several more examples. A cadet from the Crystal Collective lasted 6 hours before their perfect memory became overloaded with tactical data. A warrior clan cadet fought bravely for 5 hours before the constant retreating broke their aggressive spirit. Show them Cadet Kim Daeho, Admiral Caney said quietly. The display changed to show a young human male standing at the command console. He had short black hair and serious dark eyes. His posture was confident but not arrogant. Cadet Kim represented our best human tactical student before Hanbin arrived, Admiral Caney explained. His test scores were excellent, and his strategic thinking was highly advanced for his species. Kim Daeho's simulation began the same way as the others. The AI ships attacked in waves, and Kim responded with intelligent defensive maneuvers. His tactics were not as sophisticated as the alien cadets, but they were solid and practical. Kim lasted longer than most. He held the station for 14 hours, constantly adjusting his strategies as the AI learned his patterns. His human stubbornness showed as he refused to give up even when the situation looked hopeless. But eventually, even Kim reached his breaking point. The constant pressure, the endless waves of enemies, and the weight of protecting thousands of lives became too much. His hands began to shake as he gave orders. His voice cracked with exhaustion and stress. "I need backup," Kim finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "I cannot hold them anymore. The people on this station are going to die because of my failures." Kim's simulation ended after 14 hours and 31 minutes. He had lasted longer than any non-human cadet, but he had still failed. "Now show them Cadet Park Mi-young," Admiral Caney continued. Another human appeared on the display. She was small and quick, with intelligent eyes and steady hands. Park Mi-young had specialized in resource management and defensive engineering. Cadet. Park took a different approach, Dr. Yana observed. Instead of focusing purely on tactics, she tried to modify the station's systems to give herself advantages. Park Mi-young's simulation showed her creative thinking. When her ships were destroyed, she used the wreckage to build new defensive barriers. When her weapons ran out of ammunition, she converted civilian systems into makeshift guns. She even used the station's artificial gravity to trap enemy ships in deadly patterns. Her approach worked for 18 hours. She held the station longer than any cadet before her through pure resourcefulness and determination. The committee watched in fascination as she turned every part of the station into a weapon or shield. But even Park Mi-young eventually failed. The AI adapted to her unconventional tactics, learning to counter her creative solutions faster than she could develop new ones. The psychological strain of watching her improvised defenses slowly fail drove her to the breaking point. "I have tried everything," Park whispered as her last defenses crumbled. "I have given everything I had. It is not enough." Her simulation ended after 18 hours and 4 minutes. "These were our best cadets," Admiral Caney said solemnly. "Beings with superior intelligence, enhanced physical abilities, and advanced training. Yet none of them could complete the scenario." The committee sat in uncomfortable silence. They had watched their species' finest representatives fail against an impossible challenge. The pattern was always the same: early success, growing pressure, and eventual breakdown. "Now show us Cadet Lee Hanbin," Commander Vex said quietly. The display changed one final time. The same young human they had just questioned appeared at the command console. Hanbin looked exactly as he had minutes earlier, calm, alert, and completely ordinary. Cadet Hanbin entered this simulation with lower test scores than any of the previous candidates, Professor Zim stated. His tactical knowledge was basic. His strategic planning was simple. By all measurements, he should have failed faster than anyone else. The simulation began. The AI ships attacked in their familiar waves, and Hanbin responded with straightforward defensive moves. His tactics were not brilliant or creative. He simply positioned his ships in standard formations and began fighting. What happened next confused everyone who watched it. Hanbin did not try to outsmart the AI. He did not attempt complex maneuvers or creative solutions. When his perfect defensive positions were compromised, he simply moved to different positions. When his tactics stopped working, he switched to different tactics. Hour after hour, Hanbin continued fighting. The AI learned his patterns and adapted to his strategies, but Hanbin just kept changing his approach. When he ran out of standard tactics, he started using random ones. When his ships were destroyed, he built new defenses from the wreckage. The committee watched in growing amazement as the hours passed. 12 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours. Hanbin showed no signs of the psychological breakdown that had claimed every other cadet. "How is this possible?" General Torax demanded. "The human shows no superior abilities. His tactics are crude compared to what we have seen before." "That may be exactly why he succeeded," Commander Vex said thoughtfully. "The AI was designed to counter sophisticated thinking. It learned to defeat complex strategies and creative solutions. But this human is not using sophisticated thinking." Admiral Caney leaned forward. The holographic display flickered and changed, showing a new scene that made several committee members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Empty space stretched before them, but something was wrong with it. Reality seemed to bend and twist in ways that hurt to look at directly. "Battle Training Program Beta," Admiral Caney announced. "The Phantom Fleet scenario." Dr. Yana's tentacles curled tightly around her chair. Her species had perfect memory, but even she struggled to recall the details of this particular test. "This scenario recreates the Battle of the Void Margins, an enemy fleet that existed in multiple dimensions at once, ships that could be there and not there at the same time." Commander Vex closed her large eyes and touched her temples. The psychological damage from this scenario was severe. Many cadets could not accept what they were seeing. Their minds rejected the impossible reality. The display showed the historical battle that inspired the scenario. Ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts. When they fired their weapons, the damage was real, but the ships themselves seemed to exist in a state of constant uncertainty. Targeting systems failed because there was nothing solid to target. The quantum uncertainty field made conventional tactics useless, Professor Zim explained. Sensors could not track enemies that existed in probability states rather than fixed positions. Most cadets experienced complete sensory overload within the first hour. Admiral Caney pressed a control, and the display showed their first example. A young male from the mind reader species stood at the command console. His name appeared on the screen. Cadet Yoon Jiho. Cadet Yoon was exceptional, Admiral Caney said. His species can process multiple thought streams simultaneously. If anyone could track phantom enemies, it should have been him. The simulation began. The Phantom Fleet appeared as shifting shadows at the edge of sensor range. Yoon immediately tried to use his mental abilities to track their quantum states. His species could think in ways that normal beings could not understand. For the first 30 minutes, Yoon seemed to be succeeding. He gave orders based on probability calculations that his enhanced mind could process in real time. His fleet moved in patterns that seemed random, but were actually designed to counter enemies that might or might not be there. But the phantom ships were too much even for his advanced mind. Yoon began tracking 17 different probability states for each enemy ship, then 34, then 68. His mental abilities, which had been his greatest strength, became a curse as he tried to process infinite possibilities at once. "I can see them all," Yoon whispered, his voice filled with growing panic. "Every possible position, every potential attack. They are everywhere and nowhere. I cannot choose which reality to defend against." The display showed Yoon's vital signs, spiking dangerously high. His brain was trying to process quantum information that no living mind was meant to handle. After 43 minutes, he collapsed completely. "Neural cascade failure," Dr. Yana observed sadly. His mind literally burned out from information overload. He spent 6 months in recovery. The next example was even worse. A cadet from the Crystal Collective, beings whose minds were living computers made of living stone. Their perfect logic should have been ideal for handling quantum uncertainties. Cadet Sora lasted only 18 minutes, Admiral Caney said. The quantum paradoxes created logical contradictions that her crystalline mind could not resolve. She suffered complete matrix fracture. The display showed the crystal being's mind literally cracking as she tried to process enemies that violated the basic laws of logic. Her species had evolved to handle any problem that had a solution, but phantom ships existed in states where no solution was possible. Now observe Cadet Lee Hanbin. Admiral Caney said quietly. The familiar figure appeared on the display. Hanbin stood at the command console, looking at the same impossible phantom fleet that had destroyed the minds of more advanced beings. The committee watched as Hanbin studied his sensors for several minutes. The phantom ships flickered in and out of existence, creating patterns that made no sense to any logical mind. Then Hanbin did something that surprised everyone. He turned off his main sensors. What is he doing? General Torax demanded. How can he fight enemies he cannot see? He is not trying to see them, Commander Vex realized. He is looking at something else entirely. Hanbin focused his remaining sensors on the damage patterns left behind after phantom attacks. While other cadets tried to track the impossible ships themselves, he studied the very real destruction they caused. Blast patterns, debris fields, and energy signatures that remained solid even when their sources were quantum ghosts. The human is treating the phantom fleet like a weather phenomenon, Professor Zim observed with amazement. Instead of trying to fight the ships, he is preparing for the storms they create. Hour after hour, Hanbin's fleet moved in response to damage patterns rather than enemy positions. When phantom ships appeared and attacked, his forces were already positioned to minimize casualties. He could not see the enemy, but he could predict where they would strike based on the evidence they left behind. The strategy should not have worked, but it did. Hanbin lasted the full 24-hour scenario duration, becoming the only cadet to survive an encounter with the Phantom Fleet. How did you solve the quantum tracking problem? Admiral Caney asked. I did not solve it, sir, Hanbin replied calmly. I ignored it. The ships were impossible to track, so I tracked their effects instead. The committee exchanged glances of confusion and reluctant admiration. This human had succeeded by refusing to engage with the central challenge of the scenario, Battle Training Program Gamma, Admiral Caney announced, changing the display again. The Betrayer's Gambit. The new scene showed a massive fleet of mixed-species ships. They looked peaceful enough, but the committee members knew the horrible truth hidden within this scenario. This simulation places cadets in command of a coalition fleet, Admiral Caney explained. Ships from 12 different species all working together against a common enemy. The cadet must coordinate their diverse abilities and fighting styles. Dr. Yana's tentacles moved in patterns of deep sadness. The betrayal protocols were randomly activated. Any ship in the fleet could suddenly turn hostile based on hidden psychological triggers. Friendship became suspicion. Cooperation became paranoia. The psychological damage was extreme, Commander Vex added. Cadets were forced to watch their allies become enemies without warning. Many never recovered from the trauma of betrayal. The display showed their first example, Cadet Onari, a human female known for her exceptional diplomatic skills. She had spent years learning to work with different species, building trust and understanding between diverse groups. The simulation began with Nari coordinating her mixed fleet against a standard enemy force. Her diplomatic training served her well as she managed the different species' fighting styles and cultural preferences. Human ships worked alongside Crystal Collective vessels, while skyborne fighters provided reconnaissance. For 3 hours, the fleet operated in perfect harmony. Nari had created a masterpiece of interspecies cooperation. Her voice was calm and encouraging as she gave orders that respected each species' strengths and limitations. Then the betrayals began. Without warning, a squadron of warrior clan ships opened fire on their human allies. Nari watched in horror as vessels she had been protecting moments earlier became deadly enemies. Why are they attacking us? Nari asked, her voice shaking with confusion and hurt. We were working together. We were friends. More ships turned traitor as their hidden triggers activated. Crystal Collective vessels targeted skyborne fighters. Mind reader ships used their allies' tactical data against them. The careful cooperation that Nari had built collapsed into chaos and bloodshed. I cannot do this, Nari whispered as she watched her coalition tear itself apart. How can I give orders when I do not know who will obey them? Her simulation ended after 4 hours and 12 minutes. The betrayals had shattered her faith in cooperation itself. Most cadets suffered similar breakdowns, Admiral Caney observed. The random nature of the betrayals made trust impossible. Without trust, command became meaningless. The display showed several more examples. A healer collective cadet became catatonic when forced to fire on ships she had been trying to protect. A logical computari being locked up completely when betrayal. Patterns proved mathematically unpredictable. "Now observe Cadet Lee Hanbin," Admiral Kane said once again. Hanbin appeared on the display, facing the same coalition fleet that had broken so many other minds. The committee watched as he began giving initial orders to coordinate the diverse ships under his command. But something was different about Hanbin's approach. Instead of building trust and cooperation, he designed his battle formations, assuming that any ship could become hostile at any moment. "The human is planning for betrayal from the beginning," General Torax observed with disturbance in his voice. "He trusts no one completely." Hanbin's fleet moved in patterns that seemed wasteful and inefficient to alien observers. Ships were positioned where they could quickly respond to friendly fire. Communication networks were designed with multiple backup systems. Every tactical plan had contingencies for sudden enemy action from within. When the betrayals began, Hanbin was ready. Ships. The next morning brought heavy rain to Station Prometheus. Water streaked down the crystal walls as the review committee gathered once again. The alien members looked tired and troubled. None of them had slept well after witnessing the disturbing success methods of the human cadet. Admiral Caney entered the room carrying a steaming cup of coffee. The familiar Earth beverage had become popular among humans throughout the galaxy, though most alien species found it too bitter and stimulating. "Today we examine battle training programs Delta and Epsilon," Admiral Caney announced as he took his seat. These scenarios pushed cadets beyond tactical challenges into moral dilemmas with no correct solutions. Commander Vex rubbed her temples with her long fingers. Her mind-reading abilities had given her terrible headaches since yesterday's session. "I have been thinking about what we witnessed. The humans' methods work, but they disturb me deeply. No being should find betrayal so easy to accept." His paranoia was perfectly adapted to the scenario, Professor Zim pointed out. From a logical standpoint, his approach was optimal. "Logic is not everything," Dr. Yana replied, her tentacles moving slowly. "Trust and cooperation built our galactic civilization. Without them, we are just animals fighting in the dark." General Torax sharpened his claws against his armor, making the familiar scraping sound. "Perhaps that is exactly why the human succeeds. He thinks like a predator while we think like civilization builders." Admiral Caney activated the holographic display. "Battle Training Program Delta, the Endless Retreat." The scene showed a massive civilian convoy fleeing through space. Thousands of ships carried refugees from a dying world. Transport vessels, medical ships, and cargo haulers formed a desperate stream of humanity seeking safety among the stars. "This scenario recreates the Great Evacuation of Centauri Prime," Admiral Caney explained. 15 million civilians needed to escape before their sun went supernova. The evacuation fleet was pursued by hostile forces seeking to capture the Seo refugees as slaves. The holographic display showed the impossible situation. The civilian ships were slow and defenseless. The pursuing enemy was fast and well-armed. Military escort vessels had to protect the convoy while also fighting running battles against overwhelming odds. The key was balancing military preservation with civilian protection, Dr. Yana observed. "Save too many civilians and lose your military strength. Preserve your forces and watch innocents die." "Every cadet faced the same horrible choice," Commander Vex added. "Who lives and who dies when you cannot save everyone?" The display showed their first example. A noble cadet from the Valor Knights, beings who had dedicated their entire civilization to protecting the innocent. Cadet Jian Minsu stood tall at the command console, his golden armor gleaming under the simulation lights. "The Valor Knights consider protecting civilians their highest calling," Admiral Caney explained. "If any species could solve this scenario, it should have been them." The simulation began with the convoy under immediate attack. Enemy raiders swept in from multiple directions, targeting the slowest civilian ships. Cadet Jian immediately positioned his military vessels to shield the refugees. All civilians will reach safety, John declared with absolute conviction. No innocent being will be abandoned while I command this fleet. For 6 hours, Jian's tactics worked brilliantly. His military ships fought desperate battles while the civilian convoy continued toward safety. He saved transport after transport, medical ship after medical ship. But the cost was terrible. John's military forces were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. His escort fleet shrank from 200 warships to less than 50. The enemy grew bolder as his defensive strength weakened. "Sir, we must abandon the slower ships," his tactical officer advised. "We cannot protect everyone." "No," John replied firmly. "We leave no one behind." The committee watched as Jian's noble determination led to complete disaster. By refusing to abandon anyone, he lost the military strength needed to protect anyone. In the final hour, his last few warships were overwhelmed. The entire convoy was captured or destroyed. 0 civilians saved, Professor Zim stated coldly. Total military loss, the worst possible outcome achieved through the best possible intentions. The next example was equally disturbing. A pragmatic cadet from the merchant guilds, beings who understood resource management better than any other species. They approached the scenario from a purely mathematical perspective. Cadet Su Yonjin calculated optimal survival ratios. Admiral Caney explained. Her species can process complex resource equations in real time. The simulation showed Cadet Su making cold, but logical decisions. She immediately abandoned the slowest third of the convoy to preserve her military strength. When attacked, she sacrificed damaged civilian ships to save undamaged ones. Su's approach was ruthlessly efficient. By abandoning the weak, she preserved her strongest forces. By sacrificing the few, she could save the many. Her mathematical mind calculated every decision for maximum survival rates. She saved 60% of the civilians and retained 40% of her military forces. By pure numbers, her performance was the best any alien cadet had achieved. But the psychological cost was enormous. Su's own tactical officers refused to follow her orders after watching her abandon ship after ship of refugees. Her simulation ended when her own crew mutinied rather than participate in more sacrifices. Even optimal mathematics cannot function when subordinates refuse to obey orders, Commander Vex observed. "Show them the Harmony Collective Cadet," Dr. Yana requested. Sadly, the display changed to show Cadet Choi Inhwa, a peaceful being whose species had evolved beyond violence entirely. Her people were healers and mediators, known throughout the galaxy for their ability to find peaceful solutions to any conflict. The Harmony Collective has not fought a war in over 1,000 years, Admiral Caney explained. They resolve conflicts through understanding and cooperation. The simulation began with Inhwa trying to communicate with the attacking forces. Her species believed that all conflicts could be resolved through proper discussion and mutual understanding. "Please stop your attack," Inhwa transmitted to the enemy raiders. "We can negotiate a solution that benefits everyone. There is no need for violence or suffering." The enemy response was immediate and brutal. Laser fire destroyed 3 civilian ships while Inhwa was trying to establish diplomatic contact. "I do not understand," Inhwa whispered, watching the destruction in horror. "Why do they choose violence when peace is possible?" Hour after hour, Inhwa tried to find peaceful solutions while her convoy was slowly destroyed around her. Her species had no mental framework for dealing with beings who chose violence over diplomacy. Every destroyed ship caused her deeper psychological damage. After 4 hours, Inhwa stopped giving orders entirely. She simply stood at the command console staring at the destruction she could not prevent or understand. The simulation had to be terminated, Dr. Yana said quietly. She had become completely non-functional. "Now observe Cadet Lee Hanbin," Admiral Caney said. The familiar human figure appeared on the display. Hanbin looked at the desperate convoy situation with the same calm expression he had shown for every previous scenario. The committee watched as Hanbin made a decision that shocked them all. Instead of trying to protect the civilians, he began recruiting them. "All civilians with any combat experience report for military duty," Hanbin announced. All civilian ships will be armed with whatever weapons we can provide. Everyone fights, or everyone dies. Within hours, Hanbin had transformed the refugee convoy into a massive military fleet. Cargo ships became weapon platforms. Medical vessels carried ammunition instead of healing supplies. Even passenger transports were equipped with defensive systems. "This is impossible," General Torax protested. "Civilians cannot become effective soldiers in a matter of hours." But Hanbin's approach was working. The expanded fleet was no longer a burden to be protected. Instead, it became a resource to be used. Thousands of civilian ships with improvised weapons were more effective than hundreds of military vessels trying to protect them. The enemy raiders found themselves facing not a vulnerable convoy, but an entire population armed and ready to fight. The psychological effect was devastating. Pirates who were willing to attack defenseless refugees were not prepared to face determined resistance from every ship in the fleet. Hanbin completed the scenario with an 85% civilian survival rate and retained most of his original military strength. He had achieved the impossible by refusing to accept the basic premise of the scenario. "How did you think to arm the civilians?" Commander Vex asked. "They wanted to live," Hanbin replied simply. "So I let them fight for their lives instead of just hoping someone else would save them." The alien committee members sat in disturbed silence. Hanbin had succeeded by militarizing an entire civilian population. To their civilized minds, this seemed almost barbaric. "Battle Training Program Epsilon," Admiral Caney announced grimly. "The price of command." The new holographic scene showed a desperate last stand. A small military base was surrounded by overwhelming enemy forces. The only way to hold the position was to order soldiers into battles they could not survive. This scenario tests the psychological ability to sacrifice subordinates for strategic objectives. ADME. The third day of the review committee hearings began in heavy silence. The alien members entered the room like beings walking to their own executions. What they had learned about human psychology over the past 2 days had shaken their understanding of their newest galactic allies. Admiral Caney noticed the change immediately. Commander Vex kept her large eyes focused on the floor, avoiding direct contact with anyone. General Torax had stopped sharpening his claws, a sure sign of deep distress in his species. Even Professor Zim's normally bright red eyes had dimmed to a dull orange glow. "Today we examine the final 2 battle training programs," Admiral Caney announced. "Zeta and Omega represent the absolute limits of command psychology. These scenarios have no correct answers and no path to victory." Dr. Yana's tentacles moved in slow, sad patterns. "Perhaps we should stop here. We have learned enough. The human succeeds through methods that our species cannot understand or accept." "The board requires a complete report," Admiral Caney replied firmly. "We must examine all 7 scenarios before we can make recommendations." Lee Hanbin stood in the center of the room, as calm and composed as he had been on the first day. The young human seemed unaffected by the growing tension around him. He waited patiently for the next test to begin. "Battle Training Program. Zeta," Admiral Caney said, activating the holographic display. "The guilty innocents." The scene that appeared made several committee members gasp in horror. A massive refugee fleet approached a peaceful agricultural world. The refugees' ships were damaged and failing. Their people were starving and desperate. They had nowhere else to go. But their arrival would doom the world they sought to reach. "This scenario recreates the Proxima crisis," Admiral Caney explained quietly. 17 million refugees from the burned world sought sanctuary on New Eden. Their damaged ships carried biological contamination that would destroy the planet's ecosystem. The holographic display showed the terrible mathematics of the situation. The refugees were innocent victims of a cosmic disaster, but their presence would poison the atmosphere and kill every living thing on New Eden's surface. Billions of colonists would die slowly as their world became uninhabitable. "Both populations were blameless," Commander Vex said, her voice barely a whisper. "The refugees had done nothing wrong. The colonists had done nothing wrong. Yet one group had to die for the other to survive." No military academy had ever created a scenario with such perfect moral impossibility, Professor Zim observed. Every Choice led to genocide on a massive scale. The display showed their first example. Cadet Song Gina, a being from the Wisdom Keepers. Her species had spent thousands of years studying philosophy and ethics. If anyone could find a moral solution, it should have been her. The Wisdom Keepers can see all sides of any argument, Admiral Caney explained. Their minds are designed to find ethical solutions to impossible problems. The simulation began with Song Gina, studying the refugee crisis in detail. Her advanced mind processed every possible option, every potential compromise, every imaginable alternative. For hours, Song Gina worked frantically to find a solution that would save both populations. She calculated partial evacuations, medical treatments, and technological solutions. Her species' greatest philosophers had trained her to believe that every moral problem had an answer. But this scenario had been designed specifically to have no answer. "I cannot choose," Song Gina whispered as the deadline approached. "Any decision I make will destroy innocent lives. How can I decide who deserves to live and who deserves to die?" The committee watched as the Wisdom Keeper's mind, trained for thousands of years to find ethical solutions, simply shut down when faced with a problem that had no ethical answer. "Allow the refugees to land and both populations die from contamination," Professor Zim stated coldly. "Turn away the refugees and 17 million innocents die in space." The scenario was designed to break any mind that insisted on moral perfection. The display showed several more examples. A healer collective cadet became catatonic when forced to choose between populations to save. A Holy Order cadet spent the entire scenario praying for divine guidance that never came. "The pattern was always the same," Dr. Yana observed. "Our species seek perfect solutions to imperfect problems. When no perfect solution exists, we become paralyzed." "Now observe Cadet Lee Hanbin," Admiral Caney said with growing dread. Hanbin appeared on the display, facing the same impossible moral choice. 17 million refugees approached a world whose population would die if the refugees were allowed to land. The committee watched as Hanbin studied the situation for exactly 12 minutes. Then he made a decision that horrified them all. "All refugee ships will be quarantined in orbit," Hanbin announced. "Medical teams will develop biological treatments over the next 6 months. During treatment development, both populations will be placed on strict resource rationing." "What kind of solution is that?" General Torax demanded. "The refugees will die slowly in quarantine. The colonists will suffer for months under rationing." But Hanbin's solution was working in the simulation. The refugee population was slowly dying from disease and starvation in orbit. The colonial population was slowly dying from contamination and resource shortages. Neither group was thriving, but both were surviving in reduced numbers. "It is not a good solution," Hanbin admitted when questioned. "But both populations survive. Sometimes survival is more important than happiness." The alien committee members stared at him in horror. This human had solved the moral paradox by accepting that both populations would suffer terribly, but neither would be completely destroyed. "You condemned millions of beings to slow death," Commander Vex accused. "Yes," Hanbin replied simply, "but I saved millions more from quick death. Suffering is better than extinction." The practical brutality of his solution disturbed the aliens more than anything they had witnessed before. Hanbin had succeeded by abandoning the search for a perfect moral answer and accepting an imperfect survival solution. "Battle training, Program Omega," Admiral Caney announced grimly. The mirror. The final holographic scene was almost empty. A single command ship faced another single command ship across the void of space. They looked identical in every way. This scenario places cadets in command against an enemy that perfectly mirrors their own capabilities, Admiral Caney explained. Every strategy they employ is immediately countered. Every tactic they develop is instantly adapted. They face themselves in perfect opposition. Dr. Yana's tentacles curled tightly with anxiety. The psychological effect was devastating. Cadets faced enemies who knew their thoughts, predicted their moves, and countered their every strategy. "It was warfare against perfection itself," Commander Vex added. "How do you defeat an enemy who is exactly as capable as you are?" The display showed the first example. a genius-level cadet from the Strategic Collective, beings whose minds were living computers designed for tactical planning. The simulation began with both ships maneuvering carefully around each other. Every move the cadet made was instantly matched by his mirror opponent. Every weapon fired was countered by identical weapons. Every defensive pattern was met by identical offensive patterns. For hours, the battle continued in perfect stalemate. The Strategic Collective cadet tried increasingly complex strategies, but each one was immediately matched by his mirror enemy. His brilliant mind, capable of processing thousands of variables simultaneously, was perfectly balanced by an enemy with identical capabilities. "I cannot win," the cadet finally admitted. "Any strategy I develop will be instantly countered by an enemy who thinks exactly as I do." The simulation ended in stalemate after the cadet's psychological collapse. He had been defeated not by superior enemy tactics, but by the impossibility of defeating a perfect reflection of himself. "Every alien cadet failed the same way," Admiral Caney observed. "They approached the scenario logically, trying to outthink or outplan their mirror opponent. Logic cannot defeat identical logic." The display showed several more examples. Crystal, collective beings were perfectly matched by crystal opponents. Warrior clan fighters were countered by identical warriors. Every species' greatest strengths were neutralized by facing those same strengths in opposition. "The more sophisticated our tactics became, the more sophisticated our enemies became," General Torax growled. "Superior strategy was useless against equally superior strategy." "Now observe Cadet Lee Hanbin," Admiral Caney said, dreading what they would see. Hanbin appeared on the display, facing his mirror opponent across the empty void. The committee watched as both ships began their careful dance of tactical maneuvering. For the first hour, the battle proceeded exactly like all the others. Hanbin employed standard tactics and his mirror enemy countered with identical moves. Both ships circled each other in perfect balance, neither able to gain advantage. Then something changed. Hanbin suddenly abandoned all strategy entirely. His ship began moving in completely random patterns. He fired weapons at empty space, deployed defenses against non-existent attacks, and gave orders that made no tactical sense whatsoever. "What is he doing?" Professor Zim demanded, his eyes flashing rapidly with confusion. "He has abandoned rational behavior completely," Commander Vex observed with amazement. "His mirror opponent is trying to counter randomness." The final day of the review committee hearings brought clear skies to Station Prometheus. Sunlight streamed through the crystal walls, but the mood in the conference room remained dark and troubled. The alien committee members had spent the night processing what they had learned about their human allies. Admiral Caney entered to find the other members already seated and waiting. Their body language told the story of their mental state. Commander Vex sat rigidly upright, her large eyes staring at nothing. General Torax had polished his claws until they gleamed like mirrors, but the nervous energy in his movements showed deep distress. Dr. Yana floated in her water-filled chair with her tentacles wrapped tightly around herself. Professor Zim's red eyes had dimmed to the faintest orange glow. Barely visible in his metal skull. Lee Hanbin stood in the center of the room, as he had every day before. The young human remained calm and alert, apparently unaware that his performance had fundamentally changed how the galaxy's most powerful beings viewed his entire species. "We have completed our review of all 7 battle training programs," Admiral Caney announced. "Before we prepare our final report, I have one question for you, Cadet Hanbin." The human looked at him with polite attention. "Yes, sir?" Admiral Caney leaned forward in his chair. The question that had been haunting him for 4 days finally emerged. "How did you know these solutions would work?" Hanbin considered the question for a moment before answering. "I did not know they would work, sir. I just refused to quit trying." The simple honesty of his response hit the committee like a physical blow. This human had not succeeded through superior knowledge or special abilities. He had won through nothing more complex than stubborn determination to keep fighting. "But you violated every principle of military doctrine," General Torax protested. "Your tactics were crude, your strategies were primitive, and your moral choices were disturbing." "Yes, sir," Hanbin agreed without defensiveness. But they worked. Commander Vex finally spoke, her voice quiet and strained. I have been trying to understand your mind for 4 days. Your thought patterns are unlike anything in our psychological databases. You think in ways that should not be effective, yet they are. Dr. Vorthak, the Academy's chief psychologist, entered the room carrying a thick data pad. Her species, the Analytic Collective, had evolved to study behavior patterns across all known civilizations. I have completed my psychological analysis of the human test subject, Dr. Vorthak announced. The results are deeply disturbing. She activated a holographic display showing brain scans and psychological profiles. Every alien species in this academy evolved to optimize specific survival traits. We developed logic, efficiency, cooperation, and specialization. We became very good at solving the problems our homeworlds presented. The display showed comparative brain patterns between humans and various alien species. The alien patterns were elegant and specialized, like perfectly tuned instruments. The human pattern was chaotic and generalized, like a tool designed for unknown purposes. Humans evolved differently, Dr. Vorthak continued. They did not specialize in any particular survival strategy. Instead, they became generalist survivors in an unpredictably dangerous environment. They learned to adapt to any challenge rather than optimize for specific challenges. Admiral Caney studied the brain scans with growing understanding. You are saying that humans are designed for chaos while we are designed for order. Exactly, Dr. Vorthak confirmed. Our species seek optimal solutions to problems. Humans seek workable solutions to problems. When no optimal solution exists, we become paralyzed. Humans simply find something that works well enough. General Torax slammed his fist on his chair. But their solutions are barbaric. They abandon morality, ignore strategy, and accept horrible compromises. How can such methods be effective? Because real warfare is barbaric, Admiral Caney replied quietly. We have been preparing our cadets for theoretical combat, clean battles with clear objectives and honorable enemies. But actual war is chaotic, unfair, and often requires abandoning civilized principles. The committee sat in uncomfortable silence as the implications sank in. Their advanced civilizations had evolved beyond the brutal realities that shaped human development. In doing so, they may have made themselves unfit for the universe's harsh truths. Commander Vex looked directly at Hanbin for the first time. Do all humans think as you do? I do not know, Hanbin answered honestly. I have never considered my thinking to be unusual for my species. Dr. Vorthak consulted her datapad. Preliminary testing of other human cadets shows similar patterns. They all demonstrate greater psychological resilience to moral compromise, strategic chaos, and survival pressure. What does this mean for galactic defense? Dr. Yana asked, her tentacles moving in worried patterns. Admiral Caney stood and walked to the crystal wall, looking out at the stars beyond. It means we have been preparing for the wrong kind of war. Our training assumes rational enemies, clear objectives, and civilized rules of engagement, but the universe does not guarantee any of those things. Professor Zim's eyes flickered brighter, with sudden realization. The battle training programs were not designed to test tactical ability. They were designed to identify cadets who would break under psychological pressure. Yes, Admiral Caney confirmed. We wanted to eliminate beings who could not handle the stress of real command. Instead, we discovered that our most advanced species may be psychologically unfit for actual warfare. The revelation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The galaxy's most sophisticated civilizations had evolved beyond their own ability to survive in a hostile universe. The Proxima crisis was real, Commander Vex said suddenly. 17 million refugees did approach New Eden 3 years ago. How was that situation actually resolved? Admiral Caney consulted his classified files. Human diplomatic teams negotiated a solution very similar to what Cadet Hanbin proposed in simulation. Both populations survived through controlled hardship, rather than letting one group die completely. The Phantom Fleet encounters are becoming more frequent, General Torax added grimly. Our advanced tactical systems cannot track quantum state enemies. Human forces have been more successful against them. The committee members looked at each other with growing alarm. The scenarios they had dismissed as impossible training exercises were becoming real tactical problems throughout the galaxy. HFY, many human commanders are currently serving in active positions? Dr. Yana asked. Fewer than 3% of galactic defense positions are held by humans, Admiral Caney replied. Their species is still considered too primitive for major command roles. That assessment may need to be revised, Dr. Vorthak said quietly. If warfare is becoming more chaotic and unpredictable, human psychological adaptations may be essential for survival. General Torax stood and began pacing around the room. You are suggesting that we need humanity to fight our wars for us because we have become too civilized to fight them ourselves. I am suggesting that galactic civilization faces a choice, Admiral Caney replied. We can continue preparing for the wars we want to fight, or we can prepare for the wars we may actually face. Hanbin raised his hand politely. Sir, may I ask a question? Of course, Cadet. Why did you create these training programs if you did not want anyone to complete them? Admiral Caney paused, realizing the fundamental contradiction in their approach. We created impossible scenarios to test psychological limits. We never expected anyone to actually solve them. But problems exist to be solved, Hanbin said simply. If you create a problem, someone will eventually find a way to solve it. That is what problems are for. The alien committee members stared at him in amazement. This human saw the impossible scenarios not as tests of endurance, but as puzzles, waiting for solutions. His species' refusal to accept impossibility was both their greatest strength and most disturbing characteristic. The Academy Board requires our recommendations, Admiral Caney announced. What changes should be made to the battle training programs? Shut them down, Commander Vex said immediately. They cause too much psychological damage to be justified. Redesign them completely, Professor Zim countered. Use human success methods to create new training protocols. Study them further, Dr. Vorthak suggested. We need to understand human psychology before we can decide how to use it. Admiral Caney considered all the options before making his decision. We will implement all 3 recommendations. The current programs will be suspended immediately. New programs will be designed based on human psychological models, and we will begin intensive study of human command psychology. He turned to address Hanbin directly. Cadet, you will be transferred to advanced command training immediately. Your methods may be disturbing to us, but they are effective. The galaxy may need commanders who can win unwinnable battles. Thank you, Sir Hanbin replied with his usual calm politeness. As the committee prepared to leave, Admiral Caney made one final observation. For 300 years, we have believed that civilization was about rising above our primitive survival instincts. We may have been wrong. In a universe that does not care about our moral principles, survival instincts may be the most civilized trait of all. The alien committee members filed out of the room, each carrying the weight of a disturbing new reality.